Yeah, it's working.
Lavanya, it's working? I think it's okay. No.
Once again. Hi Roshni, hi Lavanya. Okay,
Hi,
okay, cool.
Lavanya, is it working or would Shri have to go live from Social Beat?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, is it? We're live?
Hi, everyone. So welcome to today's webinar on digital marketing career opportunities. So today's webinar is brought to you by DigiGrad. So it's a training initiative started by Social Beat, one of India's leading independent agencies in digital marketing. So our aim is to empower students and working professionals with the wonderful opportunities that's available in the digital marketing world, and also provide online teaching and courses in digital marketing as a career itself. So as part of that, in today's webinar, we will be covering the various career opportunities that one can find, be it a fresher student or somebody who's even starting to a new line of work in this field as well. Today's webinar is actually taken by Roshni, who's our Associate Vice President of Client Success. Roshni comes with several years of experience in working with different brands and different teams as well. She's an amazing team lead as well internally, and we always look up to her in terms of guidance and everything. So thank you, Roshni, for doing this. Over to you.
Thanks, Lavanya. Hello, everyone. Very good evening. Today, we're going to be looking at three key aspects. I think one, like Lavanya said, we talk about digital marketing as a career option. Two, we look at what are the different roles and opportunities that are available. If you're starting out and you're looking for your first job, then what kind of options do you have? And three, we look at how do you land your first job, right? So let's get started. I think a lot of us here as well would have definitely used some app or the other in the past 1 week to order maybe groceries or make a transfer of payment to a friend, watch something for entertainment. So I think we live in a time where everyone uses the internet for almost every single thing possible, especially with the whole COVID situation. A lot of us, even groceries and stuff, is something which we do buy online now as well and get it home delivered. So I think a lot of businesses are moving towards digitizing their business module, and hence there is definitely a huge demand for professionals who can help them grow their business online. Businesses want to engage with more customers, get more customers into their funnel as well. So that gives rise to this entire thing that we call digital marketing. We're talking about an industry which actually adds 20 lakh jobs every year and spends around 30,000 crores on digital mediums alone. To put that into context, I think the entire advertising industry in India spends around 90,000 crores, and digital is 1/3 of that today. The remaining is, of course, on channels like TV, print, hoarding, etc. But I think over the past 2 to 3 years, we've seen a rapid increase in brands moving some of those budgets towards digital and trusting digital more with the power, because the difference between digital and your other platforms would actually be the tracking and the data. You can know exactly what benefit you got, even if you spend something as low as 100 rupees versus if you spend a couple of lakhs a month. You can exactly track what value that added to your business on digital, right? So that becomes extremely powerful. And a lot of brands, traditional brands, also are making that shift because of the medium and power. The entire growth in the industry looks at three different, the three V's like we call them. These are the three key factors leading to the growth in the industry today. The first is vernacular. Vernacular content is something we've seen tremendous increase over the last 2.5 years, ever since Geo launched. Predominantly, that was the tipping point for this shift. Again, to give you context, pre-Geo, I think the cost of 1 GB internet was around 250 to 300 rupees roughly. And that was fairly expensive, right? Like people in, let's say, a tier 2 or a tier 3 market and beyond did not have access to internet because it was not affordable. But post-Geo, 1 GB of data today is anywhere between 13 to 15 rupees. So this means people in tier 2, tier 3 and beyond who've never been on the internet before now have access, and it's very, very affordable as well, right? So these are folks who probably are more comfortable in their vernacular languages. Hence, we've seen a massive increase in the consumption of vernacular content. Therefore, it also becomes important for brands to be able to leverage this. A lot of businesses are building creative assets in vernacular languages, doing creative videos or campaigns in vernacular languages. These are more relatable and will connect better with their audience as well. So vernacular is the first one. Video would be the second one. I think a lot of us do prefer consuming video content. It's a lot more easier, and even for it to also give you an idea, YouTube today is the second largest search engine after Google. A lot of people prefer to just go type their query on YouTube, see a quick video on how to solve whatever it is that they're looking for. And I think a short 1.5 minute video gives you the answer you need versus searching for it, looking up, reading 3-4 links. A lot of people are preferring to consume video for queries, as well as, of course, entertainment videos always been around. Third is voice. With voice, again, we are seeing an uptrend in the last 2 to 3 years. This is driven by, obviously, your Google Home and other virtual assistants that we have, which have become increasingly popular. There are a lot of industry estimates that say that around 30% of all searches would be voice searches by the end of 2021. So that's also something which has been significantly a new addition to the industry and has been growing year on year. Next, we look at what are the different roles and opportunities available. So for those of you who are starting out, are interested in digital, now you know that it's a legit career option. What are the different roles and opportunities that you could look at? So predominantly, there are 4 career paths you could choose in digital marketing. Your first is digital agencies, right? So if you look at it within digital agencies, you could work for agencies. Basically, agencies provide a host of services. They have a bunch of clients, and you could work for either an independent digital agency or a well-established large network agency. Both have their pros and cons. Just to give you some idea on that, I think with independent digital agencies like Social Beat, for an example, your growth is super fast-tracked. It's a young team. It's it's client focused. You make bespoke campaigns for clients. You look at it's very flexible. There's a lot of creative freedom. Everything moves really fast. The pace is pretty dynamic, and there's a lot of ownership and freedom given to individuals. And like I said, the focus is on the client and what they need, and we work around that. Versus in large networks, of course, there would be a lot more structure. There would be a lot more processes. The environment would obviously be very different. The kind of culture, the kind of teams you will work with, the kind of brands you will work with would be a different level, of course. But so depending on what you prefer, if you're someone who thrives in, the freedom and the chaos, then that's great. You should look for an independent digital agency. But if you're someone who prefers the structure, better look at the process, then that a large network should be something you look at. Of course, the growth path on both of these are very, very different and cannot be compared. Your second path that you could explore is working with consumer sectors. So you could look at traditional options like your FMCG, BFSI companies. You could work in their marketing teams directly. Or you could also look at new high growth options like industries where, let's say, at least in the last 4 to 5 months, we've seen a huge uptrend in gaming, online gaming companies. They've seen a lot of traction because a lot of people are indoors, spending a lot more time on entertainment online. So that's been something which has been picking up over the past couple of months and has accelerated post-COVID. E-commerce, of course, always been around, but also, again, similar to gaming, has seen a big uptrend. People do want to get everything delivered. People don't want to go out and shop. So these are also companies which are slated to benefit in the long term from the whole COVID situation. And of course, app-based companies, we all use a lot of apps every single day. There's Dunzo, there's Swiggy, there's a bunch of other things. So if you want to work for companies like those, then that's also something that you could explore, right? So those are your first two career paths that we spoke about. The third career path would be to work with startups. Here again, you could pick between new segments and companies which are innovating in existing segments. So when I say new segments, some examples could be Khatabook and Nisho. Khatabook is basically an online digital ledger for Kirana stores, right? So Kirana stores go digital. That's what they're in the business of that. It's an app. Those kind of newer segments are also doing really well. It's actually recently got funded by MS Dhoni as well. So those kind of segments are doing pretty well. Or you could also looking at existing segments where there are some innovation, some disruption happening. You have your big basket, your growers. Again, all companies which are going to be in a very good situation post the COVID situation as well. And you can have stable options there. Your last option is to work for B2B companies. You could work for a SaaS company. These are companies which basically sell a software. That they're in the business of selling softwares. Very different. They sell, so it's a business which other like the customers, their customers would also be other businesses. That's what is B2B. And there are a couple of companies, both based out of Chennai, these two that I put out here, Freshworks and Oilscape. So again, that could be one option. Or you could look at other traditional B2B modules as well, like your L&T or a TVS Logistics. And depending on your interest, this is, if you guys are interested in something of that sort, you could explore B2B as well. One other thing which I mentioning earlier is with agencies versus brands, right? Like a lot of you might be wondering whether to join an agency or a brand, whichever segment it may be. I think the advantage of working with an agency is that you're able to work on multiple things, right? So for an example, in the last 5 years that I've been associated with an agency, I worked on real estate, I have worked on healthcare, I worked on hospitality, I worked on B2B, I worked on a bunch of things, right? So if you're someone who enjoys the variety, or someone who's not, like, I was not sure which industry I would fit in, right? So I decided to work for an agency where I got the exposure to everything. So that's one key aspect to keep in mind. If you're looking for exposure across multiple categories and you want to explore and see which ones you like, then it's good to work with an agency. You get a lot of options. Versus if you're sure that, maybe you're interested in fashion, maybe you're interested in, whatever it could be. If you are sure that that's your interest and that's your passion, then definitely go and work for a brand in that space. Next would be what kind of roles. So these were the different sectors, like different career paths you could look at. Like, should I work for an agency? Should I work for a brand? Should I work for a company? What kind of, that could be one. Two is what exactly are the roles within these companies, right? So there are plenty of options, of course. I've just summarized some of the most common ones and try to tie it back to what your interests could be as students. So if you like coding, then you probably should explore like web designing or a web development or a UX role. These are roles who are the powerhouse for creating websites, which are mobile responsive, which keep the user experience in mind. So these are the roles which would come under that bucket. If you like writing, you really enjoy writing, then you should look at a content marketing or a search engine optimization role. These two teams work quite closely in order to write blogs, write content which people would search for. So how do you write content that people are actually searching for, and then optimize that content to make sure it ranks? Like if I'm looking for apartments in a particular micro market, how do you build content around it and make sure that it ranks on Google organically when I'm searching for it, right? So though there are some best practices that these professionals are aware about, and they would work around that. So that's, if you like writing, you could explore that aspect. If you like numbers, you love working with numbers, with Excels, then I think you should look at a role which is more to do with search engine marketing, look at PPC, look at being a data analyst. These are, again, a lot of companies, like I mentioned earlier, where you spend X amount and you know exactly what you got out of it. So these are those folks who are responsible for handling that, analyzing it. So if you ran campaigns, let's say on Google, Facebook, and Instagram, 3 different platforms with, let's say, 5 targeting options each. Then once that campaign ends, you go back and analyze, think, okay, campaign number 2 on Google did really well. So maybe we should, keep this going. Campaign number 4 on Facebook was very expensive. Maybe it didn't work. Maybe it didn't resonate with the audience. So that's also like ongoing in terms of, actually gathering that data, making sure we learn from it and improve the campaigns to make sure that our campaigns are more efficient in future. So if you like numbers, these are some of the roles that you could explore as well. Lastly, how do we get started? For those of you who are in college, final year, looking for a job, starting to think about what to do, worried about the existing situation, we just put together like a quick couple of tips, which are basic, but would definitely help you differentiate yourselves. First and most important is to definitely stay updated with the industry trends. This is extremely important because a lot of this is freely available on the internet. You just need to invest some time every day. Let's say you spend 1 hour just updating yourself, seeing what other brands are doing. Making sure that you know more about the industry will definitely give you that context of a bigger picture as well as to how you want to proceed as well. So Mad Over Marketing is one of the most famous ones. You could follow them on Instagram, Facebook. You could even go to their website, or even Social Samosa, which is a platform where they curate all latest updates and news. They also do showcase bigger campaigns, well-performing campaigns, but they also do share a lot of tips and tricks with what's happening new and what is recently launched. So it's a great way to keep in touch and know what's happening in the industry and have that theoretical knowledge in place. There are also some really niche ones as well, like Neil Patel, for an example, is fully focused on how do you drive more organic traffic to your website. If you have a website and you're getting 1,000 visitors today, how do we take that to 10,000 visitors, right? So there are certain blogs which are very, very specific with the goals. So those of you who are interested in content, then you can follow Neil Patel. Those of you who are interested with numbers, then you should follow Conversion Excel, which basically gives you tips about how to analyze that data and make sure that you're making data-driven decisions, right? So there are different things. There are even, like the previous slide was generic industry blogs. This one is a bit more specific. So once you've identified which role you're going for, then there are specific blogs which you could follow to stay up to date with that role as well. This is extremely crucial. And I think this is a great one step even when we hire for team members. It's great to meet someone who is leading, is putting the effort and, does know what is happening in the industry. A couple of other tips which can help you land your first job. First one is to build your online presence, right? Like while you all are still in college, it is very, very important, and people will be looking at what are the different, let's say if you are interested in something and you have a blog of your own, then that's the kind of thing which will really help you add value. Second, within online presence would also be LinkedIn. I think it's very important for all of you to be active on LinkedIn, have a nice clean profile on LinkedIn, update it, and make sure that you are networking with folks. Have a lot of industry professionals, follow them on LinkedIn. It will also help you get knowledge about the industry. So I think LinkedIn is extremely, extremely crucial if you're looking for a job to, network, as well as you could even find your job from LinkedIn. Second is every small thing matters. So make sure there are spend a lot of time on your CV, make sure there are no typos, make sure it's crisp, it's one page, people can easily consume what you're trying to say. Make sure your email ID is professional. Look at a cover letter which is customized to the company you're talking to. All these are really, really small things, but they definitely help you have that edge over the others. Read and learn and repeat. I cannot stress on this enough how important it is. I said it earlier as well, but in my opinion, this is the single most powerful differentiating factor which will help you stand out and land that first dream job. Do please spend at least 1 or 2 hours every day to read and learn something new. It will definitely be a great habit which is going to take you places. Fourth is certifications. This obviously helps. It also gives you a lot more, like you'll interact with industry experts. You'll be able to get their perspective on things. DigiGrad itself has a bunch of courses which I encourage all of you to go check out. So those are things which will also help build that up further. And obviously you could highlight that as well when you're looking for a job. The next one would be apply for internships. I think very important. If you're still confused, not sure, good to apply for internships, whether they are paid internships, whether it's free internships, any kind of, on the job learning that you would get would definitely be very useful and will help you. Last one is research is a must, like whichever company you're speaking to, if you've got an interview with them, please make sure that you read up about the company, you read up about their clients, read up about who the people are, who are you meeting, what is their background. All of this is not to go back and say it in that interview, but for you to have context and know where you're going, what you're doing. It will give you a different kind of confidence as well. So these are some of the tips. We now move on to the Q&A. I think we did have some questions in terms of also, when you all fill the form, there were a couple of questions. So we probably take those first and then move on to the ones from the chat box as well. First one is, which other platforms except social media, digital marketing can be done effectively? This question was asked by Chris. So Chris, to tell you, I think it's about 5 or 6 years ago, I think it was restricted to social media. Brands spent a lot more on social platforms. But I think today it's across, right? You could look at an ad on YouTube. You could look at a display ad on Times of India. You could get an ad on an app that you use. It could be across, like wherever there is sort of scope where people are consuming content, then that becomes, very easy to show ads on those platforms as well. So I think it's across, it's not just social media anymore. And as a brand, it would be important for us to leverage the entire ecosystem, not just social media. Next one was by Zishan. How should I start a social media campaign for my business? Great to know that you have a business, Zishan. I think in terms of how to get started, you need a couple of things. I think first you need a page in terms of setting up a page. I'm assuming you want to do this on Facebook and Instagram. Please let me know in the chat box if it's anything else. But you need a simple page. 2, you need the creative assets. So what do you want to, what campaign are you running, the actual creative and how it looks. If you have friends who can help you with it on Photoshop, great. If not, there's this really cool tool called Canva. You could check it out and it's really easy. Even folks who don't have too much knowledge about designing tools can get started. They have preloaded templates where you can just sort of add some images, change the text around and work around it. You could explore those. There are a lot of tools like that. You could explore them. And 3, you'll probably need some expertise to start getting, read up a little bit about the ads. You could start an ad for as low as 100, 200, 300 rupees. So try it out, test it out, run it on Facebook or Instagram and see how the results go. That's as easy as it can be. How do we go about blogging? Monica asked this question, very interesting. So there are 2 ways to do this, Monica. One is you could look at hosting this on WordPress.com, which is basically a leading blog platform. You could do this there that's completely free. So if you're just starting out and you're doing it as a passion, you could do it there. But if you have a long-term vision and you want to sort of monetize this in the future, then I strongly recommend buying your own domain. The WordPress ones would say blog.wordpress.com. So it's technically owned by them. But if you're looking for something as a long-term business opportunity or as a side income, then good to buy your own domain, buy your own hosting and then get started. What would be critical here apart from the setup is to identify your niche, right? A lot of bloggers write about a lot of things and then there's a little bit of mismatch. So important to think about what your niche is going to be. So if it's going to be, and good to get more specific. So let's say food blogger for an example, but what kind of a food blogger, right? Are you going to be someone who's focused on reviewing street food? Are you someone who's going to be focused on fine dining? Or are you someone who's like on different cuisines? What's going to be that differentiating factor? Because if you say food blogger, there's going to be thousands and thousands of them whom you're going to be competing against. If you say travel blogger, again, there are going to be thousands and thousands of them. So identify 1, which sector, yes, but 2, within that sector, what is your niche and what is going to be that differentiating factor? Why would people follow you and be interested in your content? That would be very critical. The setup, of course, is straightforward, but think about, what's the niche going to be, and obviously be consistent at it, which would definitely help you start seeing an increase in the organic traffic as well. 4th one was, where can I take a complete digital marketing course? There are many, there are a lot of online courses. A quick Google search would give you a lot of results. DigiGrad has their own full-time course as well. You could have a look at it. It's a 6-week intensive course. So you could have a look at that as well if you'd like. I want to start my own digital marketing agency. Can you share some tips? This was Farhan. Really happy to know that you're considering starting your own digital marketing agency. In terms of what you need to keep in mind, I'd say first should be what's going to be your business module and what kind of services you're going to offer. So are you going to be on a retainer? Do clients need to pay you on a monthly retainer? Will it be number of hours? Will it be a commission on their ad spends? What's going to be the business module? That should be your first. And two would be what kind of services are you going to offer, right? Important to, again, like similar to the blogging one, important to understand what's your niche. Are you going to be someone who's focused on being a creative social media agency? Do you want to be a performance agency? Do you want to be a content marketing expert? What is it, or do you want to be like an end-to-end 360-degree partner? There's no right or wrong, whatever works for you, but good to define that at the start so that you also can invest your efforts accordingly. And three would be the people. Definitely make sure you have a good team, you're working with folks, because when you're starting out, I think a delighted client is a huge network in itself, right? So if you're able to get a client on board and then you have a great team which will service them well, give them the right results, then they definitely recommend you to more people, and then it gets the ball rolling. So that would be a couple of tips that I would share for you. How significant is the role of data science and AI in digital marketing? This was by Vanshika. Very good question, Vanshika. I think, like I mentioned earlier, the only differentiating factor today between traditional marketing and digital marketing is the data, right? The people are the same, the behavior is the same, the consumer personas are the same. But the power in the platform is that you can actually track everything, and there's so much data available. So this becomes extremely critical, and it's a very, very significant role in larger agencies and even medium-sized agencies. So if you are someone who's interested in this field, I would definitely recommend that you look it up and do some courses, and definitely explore this as a career option. Great. So those were some of the questions we had from there, and now we can quickly move to questions from here. What is the scope? Chandra Roy asked, what is the scope of digital marketing in rural areas? I think this is, like I said, really, really something which is picked up in the last 2 years, Chandra. I think there are a lot of people in the rural areas who are coming on the internet for the first time now, because Jio, like I said, has made internet very, very accessible. So this, in terms of the scope, I think it's massive, provided your business, like you have to see if it's a business fit for you. If you have seen that those kind of audiences are relevant to your business, then I'd say by all means, there's a massive scope. You should definitely focus on building that vernacular content for your business and making sure that you have a dedicated team working on that strategy as well. So yes, very significant. Anshu says, what are the chances of getting hired as a digital marketer in top companies like Google and Treasure? Absolutely, Anshu. I think if you have the sort of like, if you can differentiate yourselves, like I said, if you could follow those simple tips, it is not impossible. Yes, it would be challenging as a fresher, but it's not impossible. If you have the passion and if you are willing to put in that effort to stand out, then I don't think there's anything holding you back. Ajay asked about what is your take on the difference between digital marketing and internet marketing. I think this is digital marketing and traditional marketing, if I'm not wrong, Ajay. So like I mentioned earlier, digital and traditional mediums. I think when you put out an ad in the newspaper, you would see an incremental impact on your business, but you can't be 100% sure that that came because of a newspaper ad, even a TV ad for that matter, right? Like there's no way to track that someone saw your TV ad and then bought your product. But on digital, you can totally do that, because there are unique URLs for every single platform. So if someone clicks on a unique URL, you know they came from Facebook, because that URL is unique only to Facebook. Then it becomes very easy to attribute, saying I spent X on Facebook, X on Google, got X revenue from Facebook and X revenue from Google. So that is the key differentiator that I would say between digital and traditional. I think we had another question. Sorry, just Alok had a question saying, is social media content calendar important to show in interview? Great question, Alok. I think if you could, that would show that you're proactive and you've done your research. So would definitely be a good idea. For the others, Alok is asking if you can go in with the content calendar. So let's say you're talking to a brand which is an FMCG company. You could read up about them in advance and build out a calendar saying, okay, in August we have these dates, and this is the kind of content that the brand could have, right? So that would definitely be interesting. A lot of agencies would actually give you that as an assignment. Usually if they like the interview, they would give you an assignment saying, can you work on a content calendar, sample content calendar? So if you can definitely showcase that ahead, that would definitely help you stand out in the interview for sure. And it will show that you've put in that effort. So that's definitely a good idea, Alok. Anusha had a question. What are the skills one would require to be a digital marketer? Good question again, Anusha. I think in terms of more to do with skills, like I said, you need to map it back to what your interests are, right? Because if you like content, that while that's a skill, but you should also be interested in it. I think it's more important to see what are the ways in which you can develop that skill further, but you need to have some basic interest, right? But overall, if you look at it for a generic, let's say a social media role, the kind of skills that we would look for is obviously one, communication. Two would be, being able to manage a project, talk to clients. That would be some of the more softer aspects actually. In terms of the hard skills, mostly you would learn them on the job. Or you could also, like I said, if you're interested in content, then take up a course to further refine that skill. If you like designing and you're interested in Photoshop, for an example, then take up an online course on Photoshop and see how you can further accelerate that skill. So those were that slide was in terms of designing, coding, writing, and those are the key skills mostly that you'll see that people in the industry have. But I would urge you to see which one you are interested in and then go out and look at courses which can help you further refine it. Suraj had a question on what do you think on the improvements in automation of digital marketing concepts and ads on social media, given the future we're headed? What skills is digital marketing of tomorrow hold? Great question, Suraj. I think automation is something we've been talking about for a while, and there are some ways to look at it. From where I look at it, I think while automation will accelerate as well a little bit post-COVID, but it would be for more jobs which were not adding value to people, right? The industry is going to remain, but let's say if there was something which was manually, like a tracker was being filled manually, for an example, or if, emailers were being sent manually, those kind of back-end activities are being automated so that people are more productive and can spend time on other things. So from where I look at it, those kind of menial tasks will get automated. But I think strategy, execution, being able to see what your audience fit, automation for those and AI for those is very far away at this point, in my opinion. So I think it's still safe to say that it is secure as an industry. Alok says, as a fresher, what is the salary expectation in content marketing? I think digital overall is definitely on par or a tad bit even higher than the industry. But I'd say anywhere like 25, 30 also would be something that you could look at in a month. So that would be a decent place to start. And it's definitely on par with other jobs that freshers would get as well. Nikhil asked how to reply to a client asking for approximate cost per lead. Great question, Nikhil. I think this would largely depend on what industry the client is, right? So it's important to understand that cost per lead would vary significantly depending on what industry you are in and what is the price point of what we're trying to sell. To give you an example, let's say it's real estate is the industry. If the client is selling an apartment for 40 lakhs and if the client is selling an apartment for 4 crores, it's two very, very different things. And if it's on the other hand, let's say e-commerce, a brand selling a new line of t-shirts, then that's very, very different as well, right? That's a one-time sort of impulse buy. So you tend to see lower cost per leads in an industry like that. So whenever a client asks you for a cost per lead estimation, I'd say read it up, look at, there are a lot of reports which have industry estimates. There's no right answer to it, but understand that the industry you are in and where is your client placed in the pricing. Are they a low-end player? Are they an affordable player? Or are they someone serving a premium service, right? So understand the industry and where they stand on that price bracket. Those would be two really important things before you can go look up some industry reports and find the right answer to that. What is the difference between direct marketing and branding? This last by Venkat. Again, good question, Venkat. I think branding would be how we talk about it is it's a full funnel approach, right? Especially on digital. If you are looking at someone, they first need to be aware about your brand. Unlike an offline store, for an example, where you go and you see something, you might pick it up. But online is not like that. You need to first be aware about this brand. Maybe you want to see, like, let's say you might want to show a testimonial to your consumer. Basically build that brand presence for yourself first. That entire aspect is called branding. And finally, when you're actually prompting them to take an action, then that becomes your performance or your direct marketing, right? So in the branding part, you're expecting the consumer to maybe, let's say, view your video or click and go read a blog on your website. The kind of action you're expecting from the client is very, very low intent because you're just trying to build the brand name. But in direct marketing or performance marketing, you actually want them to take action. So it might be, let's say on Facebook, you might have an ad which says, click here to buy now, right? Or click here to inquire now. Those are direct marketing ads. But if it's a video about the legacy of the brand, or if it's a video about the testimonial, like a customer sharing their experience, then that becomes a branding ad. So that's the key difference between brand and performance. I hope that answers your question. Sumit has a question. How to start my journey to learn digital marketing and get a job as I'm an MBA fresher? That's great, Sumit. I think in terms of how do you get started, some of the tips we did cover earlier. But in addition to that, I'd say since you also completed your PG, might be a good idea to start looking at internships. There are a lot of portals like there's Internshala, letsintern.com. Check some of these out and maybe try with an internship, or even if you're looking for a full-time role, I would say be active on LinkedIn, start applying. Like a quick search on LinkedIn would show you that at least like 30,000-40,000 jobs. So depending on what you're interested in, I'd say either look for an internship to begin with and know if you want to test it out, or if you're looking for a full-time job, get very active on LinkedIn, apply for jobs from LinkedIn, make sure your profile is updated, and you can apply directly on LinkedIn. You could also network with some of the HR companies, like the recruitment agencies. You could network with them and see how to go forward. Other than that, I think most of it we've already covered and I'm not going to repeat it. But yeah, definitely these would be two different things which I would recommend for you, given that you are a postgraduate fresher. Naveen had a question saying, is it better to do a full-time course in university for digital marketing, or some online courses are enough? I think there is no right or wrong here, but I think maybe if you have the opportunity to do a full-time course and you're sure that you want to build a career in digital marketing, then definitely go ahead and do like a full-time undergraduate degree in that. But mostly from my experience, a lot of people do online courses on this side, or when they decide that they want to move from traditional marketing to digital, or even freshers who are just exploring. Majority I have seen as online courses, but not to say that offline courses are bad. You should, if you find a good offline course which is credible and you know that you would have a lot of learning from there, and you know someone who's taken it, or it's a reputed institute, then definitely you should explore that as well. Otherwise, there are plenty of online courses. You could also check out some of the DigiGrad's courses as well. Ajay has a question. Due to the corona pandemic, there's a surge in digital marketing. After things normalize, do you see this dropping down again? Good question, Ajay. I think you're absolutely right when you say that there has been a surge. But I think my personal opinion is that it's here to stay, because take a simple thing, right? Like, let's say I used to buy groceries, let's say once or twice a week from a local store near my house. In the last 4 months, we've been Dunzoing groceries back home, right? So you only order them on Dunzo. Once things normalize, let's say in 6 months, there's a vaccine, it's all done. Am I going to go back offline? I'm not sure, because a lot of us, especially I think younger folks, would have seen the convenience now and would prefer to continue these. It's become a habit, right? It's quite a long time. It's been 4-5 months now. So I think a lot of habits will change. But like you're saying, we'll have to wait and see. But my personal gut feeling is that consumers will see a huge shift in their behavior, in their habits, in the way they interact with businesses. So in my personal opinion, it's going to be here to stay. But yeah, let's hold on and see what happens when things get back to normal. Sumit has a question saying, as an MBA fresher, get a job in an agency for roles like BD strategy, SSM, and skills required. Where do I start in this skills learning? Good question again, Ajay. I think in terms of how do you get a job in an agency, BD should be fine. You should be able to, like, you have to, like I said, if you can network on LinkedIn and start having some connections, I think BD should be fine. BD and social media should definitely work. For social media, the skills required, I'd say, be more active on platforms, explore the different features of these platforms, look at what are other brands doing, right? Like what is a Pepsi doing on social media? What kind of innovations are they doing on social media? Good to be aware about all of those so that you can start applying those to your clients as well. I would say for social media, once you do social media for 2-3 years, I think the natural progression is towards strategy. So my personal, like, I wouldn't have it any other way for myself. So I can tell you that it's important to start with a role by you actually get your hands dirty and you're able to, do all of it yourself, explore different platforms, explore different kind of campaigns, and then eventually I would say evolve into a strategy role. That is something which would also add more value for you as well. But having said that, it's not that you cannot. Of course, you'll have to tweak your strategy a bit, see what kind of roles you're applying for, see what kind of content you're consuming. Then, you might want to read more of brand equity, economic times and stuff like that, which if you want that sort of knowledge and that kind of a role, then I think you need to map back and see what would it take to get there. We have a question again with Suraj. Do you believe the targeting and the process of putting up ads is still far away as an automated process? Interesting, Suraj. I think it is evolving, but yes, definitely still a tad bit far from making that entire process automated. There is significant manual intervention in terms of having to set those up, because it also depends on the strategy, depends on what the brand is, what their goals are. So that's something which I think is very critical as well. But having said that, there are a lot of tools and a lot of large agencies are starting to explore that. So it's happening in parts, but I would say it's still far away. And I think it would require always some sort of manual intervention to make sure, like, while the entire optimization is picking up a lot more, like the optimization journeys are, increasingly more automated. But I think in terms of the setup and the targeting, I think that's where the expertise of a professional will come in. So that's something I believe is still going to be far away. Shaurya has a question. EdTech companies have been on a roll right now due to the pandemic. Does this potentially switch future platforms for various industries as well? Or would this trend decrease if the pandemic fades out? Again, on point, Shaurya, like you said, EdTech companies are seeing absolute surges at this point. I think the key differentiator here would be how long before this pandemic fades out, right? If this is like, again, it brings back to habits and how people will actually get accustomed. If this is going to go on a lot longer, then I think it's going to change the face of education in terms of how even parents look at it, how institutions look at it. But if this is something which can, if we're going to start going back to normal, it's just probably going to be one academic year which was lost. Maybe you'd still see that sort of consolidation. But if this lasts longer, I think then there will be a huge new industry which has been a key benefiter of the pandemic. Suraj asks, are there any industry standard researches that we can look at to understand individual digital metrics like industry-specific CPC, CPM? Yeah, there are a lot of them. Like I mentioned earlier as well, there are a lot of them. You could do a quick Google search and find a lot of them. And I think while it's important to understand one thing, a lot of these might be, US companies doing these researches. So good to keep an eye out for Indian ones, or at least look for context. I would not, like, even somebody else asked earlier as to how do I tell my client what the cost per lead is going to be. My recommendation would be to definitely use these as resources, but don't go by it as because different industries, different brands, there are a lot of variable factors, right? In the same industry, two different players might say two different cost per acquisitions because one is a very well-established brand and one is a brand new, like, just started out 1 month ago. So there are too many variable factors involved. So while there are a lot of these researches and reports, I would use them just as a guiding metric, not as, the last law of it. So look at a lot of these, but you take the final call in terms of what are we talking about? Is this a well-known brand? Are they looking at which price segment are they in and which sector they are in? Those would be three things that you should look for. Anusha had a question, like how digital media has taken over traditional mediums in the past year. What do you think would be the scope of digital marketing in the next 5 years? Interesting question, Anusha. I think one of the things we discussed was voice. That's going to be something which is definitely new. Two would be AR. I think AR has been around for a while. We've been talking about it for years together. But again, with the pandemic, there is a possibility that we see accelerated adoption over the next 3 to 5 years. Because let's say now, for an example, I'm going to take, let's say, real estate again. If I want to visit a site to see the house, I can't do that today because there might be some hygiene concerns, there might be health issues, there might be a lockdown in the city I am in. But if I actually had like a virtual setup where I could do a AR or a VR site visit, then that becomes something which brands can leverage on and adopt really quickly. So maybe this whole situation might be a tipping point for AR and VR and other advanced technologies to come in. If brands are adopting it at large scale, of course. And like I said, if the pandemic goes on for a lot longer. Harshita has a question. Is WordPress a good tool to get started with website building, especially with competitors like Wix and other visual builders gaining popularity? I think, yeah, there have been a lot of tools like Wix, which are very, easy to use, drag and drop, and a lot of people are preferring those. Having said that, I think it's two different things, right? Working with, like, if you have a WordPress or if you have a Wix, there's no right or wrong again. It just depends on what you'd like to go for. But WordPress is an industry leader. So if you want to get started, I'd still say that's the industry standard, would be good to start from there. But nothing wrong with trying out some of the others. That's perfectly fine as well, whichever you're comfortable with. Just that if you're looking at starting your own blog, like I mentioned earlier as well, do ensure to get your own domain and your own server if you want to look at it from a long-term perspective, because then you are building that credibility for yourself on the search engine as well, right? You are someone who's been around, you've been posting content, you start gaining all those benefits. So from a search engine and a rankings perspective. So if you are looking at it from a long-term standpoint, then please do ensure to buy your own domain and hosting. Harpreet has a question. I'm planning to change my career from client servicing to graphic designing. Can you please help how I can go ahead with this? Interesting, Harpreet. I think if you are looking to make that switch, I definitely recommend that you start doing some online courses. Look at Photoshop, look at Illustrator, what kind of tools are there. Get familiar with the tools. Maybe even take up a few assignments. If you have already some contacts in the industry, take up a few assignments for someone you know. Try something, or even assume you want to make a creative campaign for Pepsi, right? What would it take? So just give yourself that exposure, use the tool, get very comfortable with it, take up an online course. I think that would definitely be two ways to look at it. And with graphic designing, especially, it's a very on-the-go sort of role. So good to actually use the tool versus like do a quick primer for a course to just understand the basics, but spend a lot more time on the tool actually building that content and seeing what you have to do. Again, Naveen had a question saying, if I join as a fresher in a digital marketing firm, what are the next roles and responsibility as I climb the ladder? Interesting. So I think, like I was mentioning earlier, you look at a social media role for an example. You start out by, let's say, executing it for 2 to 3 clients. as you grow in that role, you will start taking on more responsibilities. So you might start by just doing social media for that client. Eventually, you might be the account manager. You might be the person who handles the performance ads. You handle end-to-end. You get larger accounts. That's the sort of natural progression as long as you are in execution. You can have a team of your own, become a team leader, and then see how you want to, train others as well. In terms of once that is done as well, your third level would obviously be strategy. You start working with clients as a consultant, see what are their business goals, what are their business challenges, how can you sort of help them with a big picture vision. So that's sort of the natural progression, going from one service for 2-3 small clients to multiple services for big clients to having your own team, and then obviously eventually leading the strategy team as well. Harpreet Kaur has a question. Has COVID-19 impacted the digital marketing industry? If yes, there are any chances of hiring in the upcoming months? Wonderful question, Harpreet. I think, yes, April and May did have an impact on the industry because a lot of brands were, all of us had this situation which was new, and obviously marketing was not on the top of the list. So the industry was impacted in the short term. But already, if you look at it on LinkedIn, if you just do a quick search for digital marketing jobs, you'll find a lot of companies are back because, like I said, the dependency on internet as a medium and digital as a medium has only increased with the pandemic. Users want everything delivered to their house. They want to do everything at the click of a button. So I think businesses have resumed, they have to accelerate, they have to adopt. So there are a lot of companies that are already hiring. I think we are past that stage where there was an impact. Now things are slowly rooting back, and in the mid to long term, we see the industry being benefited by the whole pandemic because, like I said, the entire consumer behavior is going to change. Suraj has a question. Do you think OTT media platforms like Hotstar and Amazon are viable platforms moving forward and will compete with YouTube ads? Very interesting question, Suraj. I think OTT platforms have been, obviously in terms of users' time spent has obviously significantly gone up in the current scenario. But in terms of are they going to compete with YouTube ads, tough to say because their business model is very different. They charge a subscription fee. So what happens is if a user has paid a fee and then eventually sees ads, I think that sort of hampers the consumer experience. So given that business module, it's a bit tough to actually run ads on the platform, which is why if you see today, there are not too many ads because as consumers, if I'm paying a premium, I expect that's the industry norm, right? If you're paying, you should get ad free, like even if it's Spotify or if it's YouTube, the expectation is if I'm paying, I don't want to see ads. So I think considering that their business module would be tough for them to compete with YouTube ads. Nikhil has a question. How do we give our personal social media accounts access to a digital marketing agency's pros and cons? I think you mean if you're having a page, then you can send a request to there's something called a business manager on Facebook, for an example. You could set this up and then send a request from there and they should be able to access it. But otherwise, from an agency standpoint, you don't need to give access, unless there's something I'm missing here. But if you join an agency, if that's your question, then you don't have to share your personal social media credentials or any account access with them at all. They will, in fact, share access to you for the particular client that you're working on. So it's completely safe. Your personal and your professional will be separate if that's your question, Nikhil. We have a question from Venkat. How can we generate leads? I think great question, Venkat. I think there are a lot of platforms which give you the capabilities to run ads, like the direct marketing ads we spoke about. Those would definitely be platforms that you could use to generate leads. For an example, on Facebook itself, you have something called a lead generation objective. So this basically helps user sees an ad, clicks on it, a form pops up within the Facebook interface, and they can actually quickly just fill their name, phone number, email ID, and then the business can download and get in touch with them via call or email. So that is very straightforward and quite easy to do. And it's within the Facebook platform, so you don't really need a website or any other additional setup at your end. You could alternatively, if you have a website, then you could also run campaigns on Facebook, Google, YouTube, any of these large platforms, or even like ads on, let's say, a Times of India, where a user sees your ad, clicks on that, goes to your landing page, and then maybe you have a form on your landing page where you're collecting name, phone numbers, and email IDs. So that's two different ways of doing it. Either you do it within a particular platform, or you drive traffic to your own property and then generate leads from there. I hope that answers your question, Venkat. Yeah, I think with that, we've pretty much covered all the questions. Are there any other questions?
I think that's about it. Thank you so much, Roshni, for patiently answering to all the questions. And thank you, everyone, for actually being very enthusiastic in asking all your doubts to us. Please feel free to fill the feedback form as well. We will also be giving e-certificates if you're interested with the name you fill in the feedback form. Yeah, I think I'm sure you found this very useful. If you have any more doubts, you can always reach out to us on social media platforms as well. Thank you, Roshni. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Lavanya. Thank you, everyone.